Welcome back to a new episode of Mushroom Programming. In today's episode, I'll be showing you how we can create a drawing app that allows you to use your mouse to make some drawings. Now, you can obviously, depending on how good you are with the mouse, be much better than this, but you can also clear the canvas. You can choose the thickness of your line or how thin it is, for example. You can also obviously choose the color using the color selection tool. So I can make it blue, I can make it red. I can basically pick any other color, just how you usually would do it on your computer, and it will straight away reflect. And then when we want, we can clear the canvas. This will be a very easy and quick tutorial, but I'm sure you're going to love it, and you can also use this as a cool project to show others. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, welcome back. Now, the first thing that we need to do is just understand what we have here. As you can see, I've got an empty Python project here. I'm using Python 3.9.6. but anything 3 and above should work. Now I'm going to get started by importing the libraries that we need to use. So the first one will be import sys, and that should work for you straight away. The second one will be a library called pyqt6, and that allows us to have some of the widgets. Now I'm going to copy it and paste it because it's a lot of things that we're going to import. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it over here. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff. And at the moment, maybe you might have an error letting you know that it can't find pyqt6. And to fix that, all you need to do is go to your terminal and type in, if I just scroll all the way down, and type in pip3 install, and then you can say pyqt6. And it should start installing for you. Now clearly I do have an issue, so let me just get that again. All you'll need to do is come to terminal, here we go, and type pip3 install pyqt6. And for me, because I already have it installed, it's saying that the requirement is already satisfied, but for you it might start installing it, and then you're not going to have the errors at the top anymore. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now I want to do this in the form of a class. So to do this, I'll simply type in class, and then I'm calling my app drawing app like this. And inside of here, I'm going to be passing the Q widget, which we imported. So I will say Q widget, just like this. Now, whenever we want to run this, we're simply going to run the class, and we should be good to go. Let's create our initialization function. So I'll say def for definition init, and then we are going to pass in self. And inside of here, let's first start by initializing a few things. Now I'm going to say super dot init, and then inside of here, let's start by creating our window. So to do this, all we need to do is say self dot set window title, and inside of here I will say pyqt6 drawing app. Now you can actually call this anything. This is simply the title of your window. So for example, it's called youtube.py.youtube, and actually I have another project here that I think if I run this I can give you an example. Yep, so right now we're basically creating our window. This was for another project, and what we just created is the title. So it says image resizer. For us, we called it drawing app. So let's go ahead and remove this one. There we go. After that, let's set the size and the position of the app. So I'm going to say set geometry, and inside of here I'll say 100, 100, 800, and then 600. There we go. And this is actually just simply the size and the position of where you want this app to start. So we want it to be 100 by 100, and then we said 800 by 800. So it will be something like this. Now let's go ahead and keep going. Now I want to say self dot drawing is equal to false. I'll say self dot last point is equal to q point. Self dot pen color is equal to q color, and here we can say qt dot global color dot black. We're going to say the self dot pen width is equal to 3, so we're starting off with 3. And then finally I'll say self dot path is equal to, and we're going to leave that as an empty array, or an empty list, sorry. And then finally we're going to say self dot init UI and open and close a bracket. Now we can start working on our second function, which will be def init UI. Here we're going to pass in self. And if this at the beginning gave you some errors, don't worry, we're creating it now, so there shouldn't be errors anymore. Here we're going to say layer is equal to qv box layer. And then here we're going to say button layer is equal to qh box layer. Now what we want to do is we want to start adding some elements. For example, we want to add a button, we want to add 2 buttons, the width selector, and so on. And so to do this, what we can do is we do things in order. So the first thing I want to add is the clear button. And to do this, I'll say clear underscore btn just for button. I'll say q push button. And let's give it a name. I simply want it to say clear canvas. After that, I want to say what happens when that button is clicked. So I'll say clear button. So we're identifying what button we want. And then I'll say dot clicked. There we go. Dot connect. And then here I'll say self dot clear canvas. Now as you can see here, this is not highlighted because we still didn't create that function, that clear canvas function. But once we do connect it, once we do create the clear canvas function, whenever this button is clicked, it says it very clearly here. So once this button is clicked, we want to connect it to that function. And basically we want to run this function, or we want that function to be triggered every time someone clicks on the clear button. Right now we didn't create the function, so that's fine. It might show you even errors. After that, we are going to say button layer dot add widget. And we want to add which widget do you guess? It's the clear button. So I'll simply say clear button. So basically what we did here is we added an overall layer, and then we added the button layer. And inside of this button layer, we're going to be adding all the elements such as the clear button, the choose color, and the color selecting tool, all in a horizontal box layer. While the overall layer, it's in a vertical box. So vertical from top to bottom, horizontal from left to right. And we're adding it over here. Great. After that, we want to add the color button, so the choose your color button. So I'm going to say color dot button is equal to q push button, and inside of here we are going to say choose color. After that, we want to have an action for when that button is clicked, so we're going to say color button dot clicked dot connect, and here we're going to pass in the choose color function, which we still did not create, but once we create it will work. And then finally, let's add that new button into our button layer widget. So we're going to say button layer dot add widget, and then here inside of the bracket we pass the name, which is color button. So I'll say color button, just like this. And I think at the moment you get the idea basically of what we're doing. We created the widget and then we're adding all our buttons inside. Now finally, what we need to add now is the brush. So we want to allow the user to specify the brush size. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now I'll say self dot brush slider is equal to q slider, and then inside of here I'll say qt dot orientation and we're going to say dot horizontal. So we have the option to allow the user to drag the size from up and down, and I'll show you that in a second, but we want it for now to be horizontal. After that, we can say self dot brush slider dot set minimum equals to 1. So we want the smallest size for the brush to be 1, and I want the maximum one to be 20. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll say self dot brush slider dot set maximum, and here we are going to pass 20. Let's go ahead and add the original value. So what are we starting with? So I will say self dot brush slider dot set value, and remember how all the way at the beginning here we started with pen width as 3. So let's go ahead and just pass that. So I'll say self dot pen width, and now we're starting off with that. Let's go ahead and say self brush slider dot value change. So now what happens if we change the size of the value, of the brush? We're going to say connect, and we're going to say self dot change brush size. And again, just like the previous ones, we still did not create that function, so do not worry if it's giving you any errors. Just ignore it for now. Now I want to add this in the button widget, so horizontal to the other button. So I'm going to say button layer dot add widget, and here I'll pass that widget. So I'll say self dot brush slider. Perfect. Now we can simply say layer dot add layer, and we're going to add that button layer that we created. So I'll say button layer, and then finally we can say self dot set layer, and we're going to pass in that layer. Cool. Now at the moment we actually created all the UI. Now what we need to do is we need to create the functions for each of these buttons. What will happen basically? It's not going to take any time, so let's go ahead and start doing it. Now the first thing that I'm going to do it is what happens when the mouse moves. So we're meant to be drawing if the mouse moves. So let's go ahead and click enter. And I want it to be inside of the class but outside of the function. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create it over here. I'll say def mouse press event, and here I'll say self event. I'll say Q mouse event. So whatever happens with the mouse, we need to check what is it. And we're going to say if event dot button is equal to Q T dot mouse button dot left button. So now we're basically checking if it is a left click, then we want the user to be able to draw. So we're going to say self.drawing is equal to true. And we're going to say self.last point equal to event.position .to point. So now we're actually drawing. We're setting up the functionality to draw. Now we're going to say self.path.append, and here we're going to say self.last point, self.last point again, and self.pen color, and finally self.pen width. So we're basically passing the new drawing based on the settings of the brush or the pen that we have. So this was for that function. Now we have another function which is mouse move event. So this was if the mouse is pressed. Now let's create if the mouse is moved or is moving. So we're going to say def mouse move event. Again, I have no idea what just happened. Mouse move event like this, and we're going to pass in self, and we're going to say event is equal to q mass event, and this is meant to be self. There we go. So inside of here we're going to check if we are drawing. So if self dot drawing, then what we want to do is we want to create a new path, which will be our drawing basically. So we're going to say new point is equal to event dot position dot to point, and then we're going to say self dot path dot append, and inside of here we're going to say self dot last point, and then here we're going to pass new point, and then we're going to say self dot pen color and self dot pen width. There we go. After that we can say self dot last point is equal to new point, and then finally we want to update our view, so I'm going to say self dot update, and that allows us to refresh the canvas basically. Now what happens if the user releases the button, so they're no longer clicking on paint? What we want to do is we want to create a function for that. So I'm going to say def mouse release event, and inside of here I'll say self and then event, and again it's of type q mouse event. So notice how any event related to the mouse, whether it's clicking or letting go, it's always labeled as the event of q mouse event. That's the type. And here we're going to say if event dot button is equal to qt dot mouse button dot left button. So if the left button is the one that let go of, then self dot drawing is equal to false. So basically we want our app to know if the button is clicked or if it's released, and if it is clicked we're going to make the drawing as true. If it's not clicked we're going to make our drawing as false. Now we want to handle a paint event, so if we're drawing, how do we want to update that? So I'm going to say def paint event, and here I'll say self event, and here we will say painter is equal to q painter, and we're going to pass in self, and here I'll say painter dot set render hint, and we're going to be passing in the q painter dot render hint, it's hint actually, dot initialize, I'm pronouncing this so wrong. Okay, it should be like this, but it's not going well, so let me just copy it and paste it in case I'm writing it wrong, but it's meant to be like this. Okay, so it seems like we did it right, and for some reason it's not recognizing it, so let's have a look at some point and run it and see. After that we're going to say full start and end and color width in self.path. What we want to do is we want to have a pen, and we're going to say q pen, and inside of here we're going to be passing all the options that the user selected, such as the color, such as the width, such as the pen style, which for now we're actually just making it as a solid line, but as you can see there is so many different options, so I'm just going to say solid line, but you can play ahead with this and see. And then I'll say qt dot pen cap style dot, and I'll say round cap, and finally we can say qt dot pen join style, and I'm going to say round round join. There we go. Now let's set our pen by saying painter dot set pen, and we're going to be passing in that pen that we just created above, And then finally, let's say painter dot draw line, and here we can provide our start and end, just like this. Now that we created that, we have 3 more functions, and that is the clear canvas one. So we can say def clear canvas, and here we're going to pass in self. And how do you clear it? It's actually pretty easy. We just need to clear that path that we created. So I'll say self dot path dot clear, and then we also want to update the canvas to reflect that. So I'll say self dot update. So that is that function. Now let's do the choose color. So I'll say def choose color, and I will say self. Now let's say color is equal to q color dialog dot get color. So this is us. Whenever we click on choose color, it will open our color dialog, and it will say if color dot is valid. So if that color is actually valid, then what we want to do is self dot pen. So set the color of the pen to that color. So we can say pen color is equal to color. Cool. Now one more function, and then we'll be able to run our drawing app and play around with it. Def change brush. So now we want to handle someone changing the brush size. So I'll say change brush size equal to self, and we'll pass in the value. And then we can say self dot pen width is equal to value. So now that we created all our functions, let's just scroll up and see. It can see it, it can see it, it can see it. So now we're ready to run this app. And first, because we created this as a class, we need to create something here that allows us to run this. So I'll say if name is equal to main. We want our app to be equal to q application, and here we'll say sys dot argv, sorry, and here we can say window is equal to drawing app. Finally, you can say window dot show, and then finally sys dot exit app dot exec, and that's actually all we need. So now let's go ahead and run this and see if it will work or not. Let me just close that one. So I'm going to click on run, and we have an error. So it's telling us, let's expand this again. So we have one error, which is saying on line 62. Where is line 62? So over here, yeah, it was that one, and it's saying QPainter has no attribute. Oh, I got it. This is meant to be QT Painter. Okay, QT Painter. Alright, let's have a look. We do have an issue with that one. Let me see because if we can have it like this. Okay, there we go. So this is the correct function. I had created it previously wrong. So this is the correct version. Let's go ahead and run this and see if we're still having an issue. Okay, here we are. So the app is running. You can see that the title is how we set it up at the very beginning here, drawing app. And if I go ahead and draw anything, we can see that that works, which is great. Choose color seems like it is also working fine. Let's see if we can change the brush size. Yep, we definitely can. And let's see if we can clear the canvas. Perfect. It all works really well. Now let me show you really quickly how we can change things. For example, if we want this to be from top to bottom, all we need to do is we need to go to our slider over here and see how it says orientation horizontal. If I go ahead and change this to be vertical, save this, and then run it again, you will see, which I actually like more, it's now on the right side. and it still works exactly the same, but all there is to it is that it's just on the right side. So I recommend you playing around with this, play around with the different layout options and see what you can do, because you might like it so much. And let me know what you think in the comments, or if you find a better way to achieve this. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you.